My name is Riley Carter. I'm 28 years old, and last Thanksgiving my mother stood up in the middle of a gleaming dining room at a high-end ski resort in Aspen, lifted her champagne glass and turned my life into a joke. I have 2 daughters, she announced, teeth bright, voice carrying over the clink of silverware. One is a famous lawyer, and the other is basically a beggar. The table broke open. Laughter, scraping chairs, someone actually snorting. I felt every gaze skim over me, from my thrift store sweater to the beat-up sneakers I'd thrown on after a 12-hour shift. Remember when she said she was going to be some kind of star athlete? Someone said. Be nice, another voice added. At least she's good at sleeping on the couch. You're lucky we haven't kicked you out yet, my own father added, as if he'd been saving that line all year. My nephew muttered that he'd rather disappear into the floor than be me. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I slid my fingers around my grandmother's necklace, felt the cool metal against my skin, pushed my chair back, and walked out of that postcard-perfect room without a word. No one followed me. No one called my name. 7 days later, my phone lit up before the sun. 6:03 a.m. from Mom. My card just got declined. Is something wrong with the bank? 8:06 a.m. from Dad. What's happening with our investments? The transfer didn't go through. Why are our accounts being flagged? 10:30 a.m. from Natalie. The bank says my cards are under review. This better not be something you did. 11:30 a.m. from Mom. Please don't do this. We know we were wrong. Call me. Where are you? If you want to know what changed in that single week between their laughter and their panic, stay with me until the end. When I got back to my tiny Denver apartment that night after Aspen, I dropped my suitcase by the door and just stood there in the dark, their laughter still echoing in my head. My mom, Linda, smiling as she called me a beggar in front of a room full of relatives and strangers. My dad, George, piling on like he was hosting a roast. My older sister, Natalie, in her immaculate blazer. The golden lawyer, watching and saying nothing. My brother Luke smirking like always, like this was just another well-worn family bit. The truth is, I was used to it. I grew up in a house where Natalie's trophies lived in their own glass shrine, and my soccer medals got shoved into a shoebox in the garage. She was the straight-A student with the law school plan and the framed newspaper clipping on the fridge. Luke was the natural leader, the kid Dad took to Home Depot and business conferences, the one everyone said would run something big someday. I was the kid doodling logos in the margins of my homework, begging for a cheap laptop so I could learn design and coding from YouTube. Every time I mentioned building an app, my parents would smile like they were indulging a toddler. That's cute, they'd say. Just make sure you keep a real job. When I tore my ACL in high school and my shot at a soccer scholarship vanished on one bad landing, they rewrote it in their heads as me quitting again. They forgot the surgery, the rehab, the nights I cried because my entire identity had flipped in a second. Over time, the comments at dinner sharpened. If you worked half as hard as Natalie, you'd be fine by now, Mom would say. Dad would sigh and tell guests, Riley is still trying to figure herself out, as if I wasn't sitting right there. Luke would joke about my endless side hustles. Grocery delivery, dog walking, freelance design. She's allergic to stability, he'd laugh. Natalie rarely joined in, but silence has its own kind of agreement. So when they laughed at me in Aspen, it wasn't new. It was just louder. It was public. It was the moment I finally understood that in their version of our family story, I was never going to be anything but the punchline they used to feel better about themselves. After I left the resort, I drove through the mountains alone. No music, just the hum of the engine and my fingers wrapped around my grandmother's necklace. Every time the car hit a bump, the little engraved edge bit into my palm. My grandmother was the only one who ever looked at me and saw more than the weird artsy kid. She used to tell me, you don't have to be the golden child to shine. You just have to stop standing where they cast their shadows. I don't think I truly understood that until that night. The next morning before sunrise, I pulled on a hoodie and went running through the cold Denver air. The sky was almost black, streetlights buzzing, my breath fogging in front of me. With every step, I replayed years of throwaway lines that weren't really throwaway at all. The jokes about me being broke. The digs. Maybe next year you'll finally make some real money. The little comments that sound harmless in isolation but grind you down when you've heard them 10,000 times. I thought about all the ways I'd swallowed it. How I told myself it's just family. They don't mean it. Be grateful they let you crash on their couch in LA. Be grateful they let you in at all. Grateful like a stray dog. Somewhere between mile 2 and 3, something in me shifted. Not a burst of rage exactly. It was cleaner than that. A switch flipped from please love me to you don't get to do this to me anymore. I stopped on the sidewalk, hands on my knees, lungs burning, and two thoughts cut through the noise with absolute clarity. 1. I was done auditioning for a role in their glossy little success narrative. 2. I was the one quietly keeping that narrative from collapsing, and they had no idea. They didn't know about the nights I sat at my desk rearranging payment schedules, so their loans wouldn't default. They didn't know whose money had been plugging the leaks in their lives. They had stood in Aspen calling me basically a beggar, while living off safety nets I had built and funded. I straightened up, my thumb brushing my necklace. I didn't imagine storming into their houses with bank statements. I didn't see myself screaming or begging. I just decided to stop. Stop fixing. Stop funding. Stop being the invisible support beam in a house where I was treated like clutter. Let the numbers tell the truth they refused to hear from my mouth. Let them feel what life actually costs when the beggar isn't quietly footing the bill. Most of my family thinks I deliver food and design pretty UI buttons for random apps when I can't sleep. They like that version of me. It fits the story. Riley the flaky, broke creative who can't get her act together. The real story started 6 years earlier in a dingy co-working space in downtown Denver, with flickering fluorescent lights and vents that made haunted house noises. I was 22, fresh off a failed fitness tracking app, sitting across from a guy named Noah Park, the first person who believed in my brain more than my own parents ever had. He looked at my whiteboard, which was a chaotic mess of arrows and scribbles, and said, "Freelancers suck at money. What if you built something that thought about it for them?" That's how LoopNest was born. An app that tracks income from different clients, predicts taxes, automates bill payments, and lets you set rules like, if my balance drops below X, pause non-essential transfers. I handled the product design and user flow, coded late into the night, and debugged until my eyes burned. Noah handled growth, partnerships, and talking to intimidating finance people so I didn't have to. First we had maybe 10 users, friends of friends, a photographer, a couple of Etsy shop owners, a wedding video editor. I still delivered groceries at night. I still took any design work I could get. I still heard my dad asking if I'd ever get a real job with a 401k. Then a YouTuber mentioned us. A small business newsletter did a feature. Users trickled, then flowed, then started arriving in waves. We added features, hired a tiny team, brought in an accountant. A local fintech blog ran an article about the money app built by a Denver girl in a hoodie. My mother never saw it. That's not the kind of thing she reads. While LoopNest grew, my family's finances quietly started to buckle. Luke's boutique gym in Dallas got wrecked by a burst pipe one winter. Insurance covered some of it but not everything, and he had a balloon payment coming due on a loan. He called me drunk one night, ranting that small businesses were a scam and he might have to shut down. Natalie, the dazzling LA civil rights attorney, took on a massive case that swallowed her time and cash. She piled expenses on her own card while she waited for firm reimbursements. She had a nanny, a high-end apartment, and student loans that gnawed through her every month. My parents, Linda and George, were slowly sinking under their mortgage and medical bills, masking it with little lies. Mom clipping coupons again. Dad claiming he just felt like staying in because gas was pricey. Aunt Brenda's catering business was limping out of the pandemic, still bleeding from a year of canceled events. To Facebook and holiday letters, they all looked successful. To me, hearing late-night confessions, seeing stress in their texts, they looked like they were being held together by duct tape and wishful thinking. That's when LoopNest stopped being just a product and became a lifeline. One night, staring at all the automated rules we built to protect strangers, I built new ones for me. I carved out a folder in my personal LoopNest account and named it Family Safety Net. Inside it, for sub-accounts, Luke's gym debt, Natalie cards and nanny, Mom and Dad mortgage and utilities, Aunt Brenda business loan. Every bit of extra income from my biggest contracts didn't go into savings or vacations or a down payment on my own place. It flowed into that folder, then out again in carefully programmed drips. I didn't say a word about it, not because I wanted to play hero, because I knew exactly how it would unfold if I did. They'd thank me at first. Then they'd start to rely on it. Then they'd rewrite the story in their heads, so that my help became background noise while their hard work stayed in the spotlight. So I let the app do it quietly. I set a rule to cover Luke's lease shortfall if gym revenue dipped below a certain threshold. I automated monthly payments toward Natalie's high-interest card, so her balance didn't snowball. I made sure Mom and Dad's mortgage never rolled more than 30 days late by scheduling transfers right before penalties hit. I sent small, steady amounts toward Brenda's loan so the bank would stay off her back. Over 5 years, those little emergency boosts added up to about $360,000 I could have used for, say, a house. Or health insurance with a deductible that didn't make me flinch. Or a savings cushion big enough to actually sleep at night. I tracked every cent in LoopNest. Every time I watched a red bar turn yellow then green because of my transfers, I felt a strange pride because I'd built something powerful enough to change lives, and shame because the lives I was changing belonged to people who still introduced me as their cautionary tale. In Aspen, when my mom called me basically a beggar, she was wearing a designer jacket bought on a credit card that wasn't in collections yet because of a payment I'd scheduled. Luke's comeback story after the flood? Paid for in part by the little sister he said was allergic to stability. Natalie's carefree extra glass of wine? On a card whose interest I'd been quietly chopping down for months. Later, standing alone in my apartment after that trip, I opened my laptop and logged into LoopNest. The family safety net dashboard filled the screen. 4 columns of names, 5 years of transactions, 1 ugly total at the bottom. My cursor hovered over the rules I'd written. Auto transfer every Friday. Cover late fees automatically. Round up spare income to family accounts. I didn't feel fiery in that moment. I felt hollow, bone-deep tired. I thought of my grandmother's voice, stopped standing where they cast their shadows, and started clicking. One by one I disabled the rules. I canceled future transfers. I raised my own safety threshold so my overflow would stay with me instead of bleeding out on autopilot. I didn't erase the records. I didn't touch their logins. I didn't hack anything. I just took myself out of the equation. Each time I hit save, LoopNest made a small confirmation sound. To anyone else, just a harmless blip. To me, it sounded like a rope snapping. Somewhere down the line, the bills would arrive. And for the first time in years, I wouldn't be there, ghostwriting their miracles. They wanted to call me a beggar? Fine. Let's see how their picture-perfect lives did without the beggar's money. The first ripple hit 3 days later, early Thursday. Denver's sky was that flat gray blue that feels like morning is still thinking about it. My phone buzzed at 6:03 a.m. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a client in another time zone, but the preview made my stomach tighten. Mom, my card just got declined at Starbucks. The app says insufficient funds. Is the bank having issues? For years, LoopNest had quietly topped up her account whenever her balance drifted too low. Declines never got the chance to happen. Now reality was walking in. I put the phone face down and brushed my teeth. By 7:15, 3 more texts and a missed call were stacked on my lock screen. The mortgage company sent another late notice. I thought that was all on autopay. What's going on? That word autopay stabbed at me. As if some invisible system, not me, not my late-night number juggling, had been taking care of them all along. At 8:06, my dad's name flashed on my screen. I let it ring out once. The second time, I answered and held the phone to my ear without speaking. Riley. His voice was clipped, jittery, like he'd been pacing. What's happening with our accounts? The investment transfer didn't go through. The bank says everything is suddenly under review. Did you do something? There it was. Not a single beat of self-reflection, just the immediate assumption that if something was broken, I'd broken it. I didn't do anything, I said evenly. Did you pay your bills with your own money? Silence. I could almost hear him trying to rearrange that sentence into something that didn't implicate him. Don't be smart, he snapped. We've never had problems like this. Overnight the mortgage is flagged, the credit card payment bounced, my retirement account is frozen. That doesn't just happen. He was right. It doesn't just happen. It took me, in a small apartment in Denver, systematically turning off every lifeline I'd built for them. Maybe ask your bank, I said. You're the one who's always in control, remember? Before he could spit something back, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but underneath the tremor was something cool and startling relief. For the first time, the heaviest thing around my neck wasn't my grandmother's necklace. It was a weight I'd been carrying for everyone else. By 10:30 a.m. my phone was a storm. A screenshot from Natalie of a bank email, subject line, "Account temporarily frozen." Her text under it, "They're saying I have an unpaid balance and reviewing my accounts. I had everything scheduled. Did you change something when you stayed here? If this is some kind of punishment for Aspen, it isn't funny. I have court this week. I can't have my cards bouncing." The word punishment made anger crackle in my ears. As if I'd hacked her life just to inconvenience 1 week, instead of spending 5 years dragging her away from financial disaster and silence. As if she hadn't sat in Aspen and watched me get shredded for sport. I wrote 3 replies, deleted them all, and settled on nothing. Silence said more than any paragraph could. At 11:30, a voicemail came in from Mom. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. All the performance burned away. "Riley, honey, please call me back. The mortgage company called again. They said if we don't make a full payment this week, they'll start foreclosure. Your father's retirement account is locked until we pay something overdue. Natalie's cards are being checked. Luke's saying the gym lease is in trouble. I don't understand. Please don't do this. Whatever this is. You know we were just joking at dinner, right? Please. Where are you?" I listened twice. First with my heart, hearing my mother genuinely afraid. Then with my head, hearing the familiar pattern. We were just joking. Minimize, smooth over, reset. Normal in our family always meant I paid the cost. I replayed Aspen in my mind like a tape. The champagne. The laughter. My father saying I was lucky they hadn't thrown me out. Lucky. Then I hit record on a message back. Kept my voice calm and said, "Who are you? Do I know you? Why should I help?" No yelling. No insults. I pressed send and set my phone down beside my keyboard. Outside, the sun was finally dragging itself over the rooftops. Light flashed on the thin crust of snow along the sidewalk. I laced my running shoes, wound my grandmother's necklace around my fingers, and headed out. My footsteps thudded in rhythm with a thought I couldn't shake. For years they treated my exhaustion like laziness and my life like a joke. Now the joke had stopped subsidizing their bills. Actions have consequences. For once, those consequences weren't landing on me. The messages didn't slow. They multiplied. By Friday afternoon, my phone looked like a fire alarm. Missed calls from Mom, Dad, Natalie, even Luke, who never calls unless he needs something. The family group text bloomed with panic. Mom sent a long paragraph about misunderstandings and we didn't mean it like that, and ended it with, "Also, do you know why the electric bill bounced?" They said the account used to be in good standing. Used to be. That phrasing almost made me laugh. On Saturday, I was dropping off a grocery order when my building's front door camera pinged. I opened the feed and saw my parents on the screen, bundled in coats outside my apartment. Dad knocked like he owned the place. Mom kept scanning the hallway as if someone might recognize her and ask what went wrong. They had flown in from Sacramento without telling me. For a second, guilt tugged a reflex. They're your parents. Let them in. Fix it. Then I saw Mom in my head, toasting to her beggar daughter with a practiced smile. Heard Dad saying I was lucky they hadn't kicked me out. I slid my phone back into my pocket and drove to my next delivery. Later, I listened to the intercom audio. "She's not answering," Mom whispered. "What if something happened?" "Nothing happened," Dad muttered. "She's being dramatic. She probably did something to the accounts and now she's hiding." If it hadn't been so bitter, it might have been funny. The same man whose mortgage I'd been quietly paying for years now accusing me of wrecking his finances for attention. That night I was in my usual coffee shop, headphones around my neck, tweaking a client's onboarding flow, when someone knocked on my table. Natalie and my dad. They looked out of place among the chipped mugs and mismatched chairs, like they'd wandered in from a law drama and a golf commercial. "Can we sit?" Natalie asked, already pulling out a chair. They settled across from me like this was a formal meeting. "You look busy," Dad said, eyeing my open laptop. The LoopNest dashboard glowed on the screen. I quickly toggled to a blank wireframe. "Just freelance stuff," I said. "You know. The unstable life of a beggar." Natalie flinched. "We need to talk about what's happening," she said. "The timing's suspicious." "What timing?" I asked. Dad leaned forward. Your mother's card getting declined. The foreclosure notice. My retirement account frozen. Natalie's cards on hold. Brenda's business line suddenly under review. All within days of you storming out of Aspen. That's a hell of a coincidence. There it was again, my reactions framed as the problem, not their treatment of me. You think I'm sitting in Denver hacking every bank in America? I asked. I barely keep my grocery deliveries straight. No one said hacking, Natalie replied, slipping into her courtroom tone. But you're the only one who understands all these financial apps. You stayed with me in LA, helped me set up some payments. Maybe you alter something you shouldn't have. Maybe you're angry and using whatever access you have to teach us a lesson. Underneath the polished words, I heard what really scared her. Loss of control. I don't have access to your accounts, I said. I never did. If your life collapses because a few automatic transfers stopped, maybe the issue isn't me. Maybe it's that you've been living on money you didn't know was there. Dad's brow knit. What does that mean? I really looked at him then. Deeper lines in his forehead. Eyes duller than I remembered. Age and stress had snuck up on him. For a breath, I almost reached for him. Then I remembered how easily he'd humiliated me. How quick he'd been to assume I'd broken something. It means, I said. You should probably ask your bank who's been keeping your lights on. He smacked his palm lightly on the table, rattling my cup. You don't get to talk to us in riddles. We're your family. I felt the pendant under my shirt, a small steady weight. Family. The word that had been used my entire life to excuse every casual cruelty because that's just how we are. I closed my laptop, slid it into my bag and stood. I have a meeting, I said. If you want real answers, you're not going to get them by ambushing me and accusing me of crimes. Then how? Natalie demanded. Her voice cracked on the last word. It was the first genuine crack I'd heard in years. I paused. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging for their attention. They wanted something from me. Thursday, I said. 7 p.m. Right here. Bring Mom. Bring Luke. Bring Aunt Brenda. Anyone who thinks I ruined their life needs to be in the same room. And you all need to actually shut up long enough to hear me. Dad narrowed his eyes. Why Thursday? Because I said so, I answered. You've scheduled my life around your expectations for 28 years. You can clear one evening for me. No quick comeback this time. Natalie glanced at him, then back at me. Fine, she said. We'll be here. They left. The bell over the door jingled as it swung shut. I sat back down, hands still buzzing. A minute later, my phone lit up. Mason, hey Aunt Riley. Mom and Grandpa are freaking out. I just wanted to say I thought the joke at Thanksgiving was crap. Also, me and my friends have been using your app. It's actually brilliant. If you ever have time, could you maybe show me some coding stuff? I stared at the word brilliant until my eyes blurred. Someone in this family saw me. And he wasn't asking for money, just knowledge. Sure, I typed back. We'll start after I deal with some things this week. For the first time since Aspen, I felt something sharper than exhaustion. I felt focused. They wanted to know what happened to their stable lives. On Thursday at 7, in a cramped coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and vanilla syrup, I was finally going to tell them. The shop felt smaller that night, like the walls had leaned in. I arrived early and took a table in the back corner, laptop open. Noah sat a few tables away with his own computer, headphones around his neck. We'd gone over everything the night before. Every transfer, every contract, every potential angle. Making sure our footing was rock solid. At 7:02 the bell rung. My parents came in first, rigid and tight-lipped. Natalie followed in a dark blazer. Luke in a gym hoodie with his wife Erin behind him. Aunt Brenda slipped in last, wringing her hands. Mason hovered near the doorway, then took a seat off to the side. They ringed my table like a jury. Riley, Mom said, forcing a smile that looked painful. Thank you for meeting us. We just want to understand what's happening. With the bank, the bills, your message. Dad skipped the preamble. Did you mess with our accounts or not? He demanded. I looked at each of them in turn. People I'd quietly broken myself to protect. No, I said. I did not log into your banking. I did not hack anything. The only thing I did was stop pouring my money into a life you couldn't afford. Confusion rolled around the table. What are you talking about? Natalie asked. Your money? You don't have that kind of money. You're always saying you're broke. I say I'm broke, I replied, because after I pay my rent and my business expenses, I've been sending almost everything else to you. I rotated my laptop so they could see the screen. The LoopNest dashboard glowed. My branding, my layout, my name in the corner. For columns. For names. Years of transactions rendered as neat lists and color-coded bars. This, I said quietly, is where your emergencies went to be fixed. For a moment no one moved. Luke leaned closer, squinting. Is that my gym lease number? Why is that in your app? Because, I said, when your income dipped after the flood, I set an automatic rule. Whenever your balance dropped below a line, my income covered your lease and equipment payments. If I hadn't, you would have defaulted 2 winters ago. Erin clapped a hand over her mouth. That makes no sense, Natalie cut in. Mom and Dad helped him. Not you. Mom and Dad could barely cover their own house, I said. Check the dates. Every time you thought the bank gave you a grace period, or some miracle payment posted. It wasn't luck. It was me. I clicked to the next column. Natalie's name. A list of card payments, nanny invoices, filing fees. Each one topped up at the last moment. For 5 years, I said. I've been using my own app to funnel my money into your crises. Luke's gym. Your cards and nanny. Mom and Dad's mortgage and utilities. Aunt Brenda's loan. Every time you said, we got so lucky, that luck was my direct deposit. Aunt Brenda let out a small strangled sound. My mother's face crumpled. Dad went very still. Natalie stared at the numbers like they were in a foreign language. Why? She finally whispered. Why would you do this in secret? Because I knew how it would go if I told you, I said. You'd be grateful for a minute. Then you'd expect it. Then you'd rewrite the story so my help became background noise while your grind stayed center stage. And you'd still sit at tables like Aspen and laugh about how I'm the one who can't get it together. Luke snorted, but the fight was thin. Okay, even if that's true sometimes, you can't just yank it all overnight and watch everything fall apart. That's messed up. You mean, I asked, I'm not required to fund your lifestyle indefinitely so you can pretend you did it all yourself? He looked away first. Natalie cleared her throat. And this app? LoopNest. You built this. I co-founded it, I said. I tipped my chin toward Noah. That's the other half. Hey, he said, lifting a hand. We have accountants, lawyers, investors. All of them have seen these records. Every transfer is from Riley's personal accounts. No one touched yours. All we did was build an automated safety net under people you love. Dad seized on the one thing he could grab. You're telling me, he said, voice tight, that instead of saving for your future, you've been dumping money into us? That's irresponsible, Riley. That's not how you become successful. I am successful, I said, and for the first time I let myself believe it out loud. You just never bothered to look. The espresso machine hissed behind us. Cups clinked. The world outside kept moving like nothing was happening. Natalie straightened, sliding into her lawyer persona like a suit jacket. Intentions aside, she said, there's a real legal issue here. You used financial information we shared with you to set this up. That's data. That's access. We spoke to someone. There's an argument you built part of this company on our backs. That we're entitled to a share. Maybe a controlling share. There it was. The angle. They hadn't just come scared. They'd come armed, having already decided that if there was money, it must somehow belong to them. You consulted a lawyer, I said slowly, about suing your beggar daughter. Mom gasped. Natalie. You said you were just getting advice, not. I said I'd explore options. Natalie shot back. Riley's using payment tools that involved us. A court could say we have leverage. At minimum, she owes us equity. Noah's eyes cooled. His tone stayed mild. Just so we're on the same page, he said. You're suggesting the person who's been secretly paying your bills for years should now give you part of the company that made that possible. Because you feel you deserve it. Dad bristled. We're saying this was a family effort. We trusted her with information. She built on it. You didn't trust me, I said. You tolerated me. You let me sleep on your couch and called me lazy to your friends. You rolled your eyes at my little app. Then turn to that same app every time a bill threatened to cave your life in. The only time you thought about ownership was after the money stopped. Natalie opened her mouth, but Noah spoke first. You're late to the equity conversation anyway, he said. We signed a term sheet last month. A fund in San Francisco is buying a majority stake in LoopNest. Their lawyers have already gone through every cent. They know exactly how much of Riley's income went out to you. If you file anything claiming rights to this company, you're not getting a payout. You're getting questions about why you think you should profit off money you didn't earn. The silence after that was thick. Luke's jaw hung slightly open. Aunt Brenda whispered something under her breath in Spanish. My mother stared at me like I was someone she'd never met. Natalie looked like the floor had dropped under her feet. You sold the company, she said quietly. And you never told us. It's my company, I said. My work. My risk. I told the people who backed me when it looked like nothing, Noah, my team, my friends. The people who didn't laugh every time I said I was building something. You had years to take me seriously. You chose not to. So this is revenge? Luke snapped. You walk away rich while we drown, and you post about being a victim online? This, I said, is me stepping out of the way of consequences you created. You borrowed more than you could repay. You spent like the money would always appear. I was the magic trick. I stopped performing. Mason finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. You guys, he said, looking from face to face. We've been using LoopNest at school. My friends love it. She did something real. You can't just decide she owes you because you're embarrassed now. Natalie's glare shot toward him, but he didn't flinch. The power balance in the room had shifted so far it felt like a different family. Dad, who always had some definitive last word, stared down at the table. Mom's eyes shone with fear and guilt. Aunt Brenda looked crushed. Luke radiated anger. Natalie looked like she was mentally flipping through every tactic she knew and coming up empty. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup. Let its warmth anchor me. Here's what happens next, I said. Nothing. The transfers are off. They stay off. I'm not going to jail. You're not getting a slice of a company you never believed in. You're going to go home and deal with your banks like every other adult. I stood. If any of you want to talk after that, really talk, not accuse me or treat me like an ATM, we can schedule something. In my office. On my terms. Until then, this conversation is over. I walked toward the door. Riley, please, Mom choked behind me. We're your family. My fingers found my necklace. For years, family had meant I was the one who had to bend, swallow, pay. Maybe it was time for it to mean something else or nothing. I kept walking. Monday, they stepped into a part of my life they'd never bothered to imagine. The LoopNest office. Downtown Denver, out the windows, floor-to-ceiling glass catching the light. A jungle of mismatched plants someone's girlfriend had rescued. Whiteboards covered in diagrams and sticky notes. Second-hand chairs pulled up to desks with expensive monitors. Not a Silicon Valley movie set. But real. Mine. I stood by the small glass conference room as they came in. Mom and Dad together, shoulders almost touching. Natalie taking a seat closest to the door. Luke leaning back in his chair, arms folded like armor. Aaron and Aunt Brenda quiet, eyes roaming. Mason near the end of the table with a notebook, looking like a kid who actually came to learn. I clicked a remote. The big screen on the wall lit up with simple slides and charts. This, I said, is what you never saw. Revenue graphs. User growth timelines. Screenshots of tech right UPS with my name and Noah's. Calendars crammed with nights and weekends they once called wasting your 20s. Then I put the part that mattered most on the table. Literally. For folders. For names: Luke, Natalie, Mom and Dad, Brenda. Each one held a printed summary of every transfer I'd made for them. Dates. Amounts. Purposes. Mortgage top UPS. Card payments. Lease covers. Late fees I'd eaten. Together. Just over $360,000. This isn't a guilt trip, I said as they opened them. It's a record. This is what actually happened under the stories you tell at parties. I'm not showing you this so you'll beg. I'm showing you so we can at least be looking at the same reality. The air in the room changed. Dad flipped through his pages, throat working. Mom traced a line item: roof repair. She'd convinced herself the insurance company had randomly covered. Aunt Brenda stared at the total on the last page like it was someone else's number. Luke skimmed angrily while Aaron read every line, eyes filling. Natalie's expression shifted from shock to calculation to something like shame, as she realized how much of her life would have exploded without those payments. Mom finally spoke, voice shaking. "Why didn't you come to us?" she whispered. "If you were doing all this, if you were this successful, why did you let us keep talking about you like that?" I swallowed. "Because for a long time," I said, "I believed you. I thought if I just proved myself a little more, one more crisis handled, one more bill paid, you'd finally see me as anything other than a disappointment. I thought taking care of everything quietly was the price of being included. And what I got in return was jokes. Eye rolls. Aspen." Luke lifted his head, eyes glassy. "We didn't know," he said. "You never told us." "You never asked," I replied. "You liked thinking of me as the screw-up. It made you feel bigger." Natalie flinched. She didn't argue. Noah stepped in, not as my co-founder but as my witness. "Legally," he said gently, "every dollar here came from Riley. Her contracts, her salary, her equity. You didn't sign anything. You didn't fund this. You didn't sit here at midnight fixing bugs. You didn't risk your credit to get this off the ground. Riley did. There's no court that's going to look at these numbers and say you're owed part of what she built. There's no case. Just hurt." For once, Natalie didn't challenge the law. She stared at the table. I took a breath. "I'm not here to flip the switch back on," I said. "That's not happening. I'm not here to go back to normal. That's gone. But I'm also not interested in watching you implode if there's a better way. So here are your options, clearly." I turned to Luke. "You can keep pretending the gym is one big comeback story until the bank takes it," I said. "Or you can sell part of it now, restructure your debt, and walk away with something instead of nothing. If you want help figuring that out, I'll give you my time and my brain. Not my money. We do it with contracts transparently. I'm not your invisible backup anymore." His jaw tightened. He didn't nod. He also didn't tell me to go to hell. Progress in Luke terms. To Natalie, I said, "You can keep living one billing cycle away from disaster and blaming me when it hits. Or you can hire a financial planner and stop treating your credit cards like monopoly money. I'll connect you with someone good. You'll pay them yourself. And if you ever call me a beggar again, I block your number." No debate. Mom's face twisted at that line, but she didn't defend the joke. To my parents, I let the softness and steel mix. "You need therapy," I said. "Not because you're monsters. Because you've measured worth in degrees and job titles for so long you can't see anything else. You can ignore that and decide I'm just bitter. Or you can sit with someone neutral and unpack why you needed one star child and one cautionary tale. I won't pay for it, but if you actually go and actually do the work, I'll consider holidays again." "Maybe." Aunt Brenda shook her head, tears slipping free. "I'm so sorry, Mija," she murmured. "I knew you were helping. I didn't realize how much. I will pay you back. Even if it takes me forever." "On the record with a plan," I said. "No more secret rescues." Then I turned to the only person in the room who hadn't asked me for a bailout. "And you," I said to Mason. "If you still want to learn to code, I meant what I texted. You can intern here after school. We'll start with the basics. You can sit in on product meetings. See what it looks like to build something when nobody believes in it yet." His whole face lit up. "Yeah," he said. "I want that. I really want that." The energy in the room shifted. The anger didn't vanish. The shame didn't dissolve. But the fantasy did. The story where they were flawless successes and I was the family embarrassment was gone. Replaced by something messier and true. They were adults who'd made bad decisions and hidden behind jokes. I was the daughter they dismissed who had built the net holding them up, and then chosen to move out from under them. When the meeting ended, there were no cinematic reconciliations. At the door, Mom hugged me too hard, sobbing apologies into my shoulder. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. I just said, "Thank you for saying it," and stepped back. Dad shook my hand. Actually shook it like we were business acquaintances. His grip was firmer than his voice. "I didn't know," he said. "You didn't want to know," I answered quietly. "There's a difference." He didn't argue. Natalie lingered. If I go to therapy, she said. If I fix this. If I stop all of this. Do you think we can ever be close? I thought about it. Really thought. I think we can be honest, I said. Closeness comes after that, not before. She nodded, eyes wet, and left. Luke walked out without looking at me. A week later, an email hit my inbox from him. Do you know anyone who helps small business owners wind down without losing everything? That was his apology. I took it. Months passed. The sale of Loop Nest closed. I signed the documents with steady hands, my grandmother's necklace warm against my collarbone. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment and bought furniture that wasn't disintegrating. When I said I was tired, it finally meant I was tired from my own life, not from carrying everyone else's. That Thanksgiving, I didn't go to Aspen or Sacramento. I laced up my boots and hiked in the snow outside Denver instead. Air sharp in my lungs, the world quiet and white. Halfway up the trail, my phone vibrated. Pictures from Mason, screenshots of his first working code, messy but alive. Look, he wrote. It runs. I smiled, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and turned it to silent. People love to say, family is everything. That you owe them infinite chances, infinite forgiveness, no matter what they say or do. I used to believe that. I used to think if I just absorbed the jokes and swallowed the hurt, they'd eventually see me. Here's what I've learned. Family is not a free pass to treat someone like a cheap laugh. Love without respect is just control in a nicer outfit. You're allowed to care about people and still refuse to bankroll their denial. You're allowed to wish them well and still get up from a table when the price of sitting there is your self-worth. Cutting them off financially wasn't about revenge, even if watching the miracles stop felt like justice some days. It was about stepping out from under their shadows and letting cause and effect do their job. Actions have consequences. Mine was building something real. Theirs was never imagining that the beggar might be the one holding the net. If forgiveness comes, it'll be on my timeline, not theirs. Maybe one day I'll sit at their table again. Maybe I won't. If I do, it will be because they've learned to see me clearly, not because they need another bailout. And if you're reading this and wondering whether you're cruel for wanting distance from people who call their cruelty jokes, here's what I wish someone had told me years ago. You're not cruel for drawing a line. You're not ungrateful for expecting respect. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let the people who hurt you finally feel what life is like without your constant, quiet support.